Based on our discussion in previous chapters about the parts of the brain and their primary functions, and from the information presented in the Brain Part 1 and Part 2 videos, we now have a solid understanding of the brain. Today, we will talk about cerebrum or cerebral hemisphere. To understand cerebrum or cerebral hemisphere, clearly we need to recall the terms gyri, singular, gyrus. The raised, folded ridges on the surface of the cerebral cortex, sulci, singular, sulcus. The grooves or furrows that separate the gyri, deeper sulci, are also called fissures. The longitudinal fissure is the deep groove that divides the left and right halves of the brain, known as the cerebral hemispheres. This prominent groove runs down the center of the brain and is a crucial anatomical feature, though the two hemispheres remain connected by the corpus callosum to allow for communication. The longitudinal fissure is a major sulcus, groove, in the brain's surface, and within it lies the falx cerebri, a fold of the meninges, brain tissue. The central sulcus, also known as the sulcus of Rolando, is one of the largest sulci present in the brain. It is located between the frontal and parietal lobes. What large vein is located in the longitudinal fissure? The superior sagittal sinus is the large venous structure located in the longitudinal fissure. It runs in the midline of the brain, along the falx cerebri, and collects venous blood from the cerebral hemispheres and reabsorbs cerebrospinal fluid. Another vein, the inferior sagittal sinus, is located deeper in the fissure, along the inferior border of the falx cerebri. The precentral and postcentral gyri are two ridges in the cerebral cortex that are separated by the central sulcus. The central sulcus, also known as the sulcus of Rolando, is one of the largest sulci present in the brain. It is located between the frontal and parietal lobes. Apart from being the boundary between the two lobes, the precentral gyrus is the motor cortex, responsible for controlling voluntary movement on the opposite side of the body. The postcentral gyrus is the somatosensory cortex, which receives and processes sensory information like touch, pain, and temperature from the body. The precentral gyrus is in the frontal lobe, while the postcentral gyrus is in the parietal lobe. Both are located on either side of the central sulcus, with the precentral gyrus in front, motor cortex, and the postcentral gyrus behind it, sensory cortex. The primary motor cortex is the brain's control center for voluntary movement, located in the frontal lobe. It sends signals to the body's muscles, telling them to move, with different areas controlling specific body parts in a map-like arrangement, such as the hand and face having a larger representation than the trunk. This part of the brain is responsible for the execution of movements that have already been planned by other areas. The primary motor cortex is the on switch for planned movements, sending nerve impulses down to the spinal cord. When we decide to move, the primary motor cortex sends a signal down through upper motor neurons. These neurons travel to the spinal cord and connect with lower motor neurons that directly control muscle fibers. To execute a skilled movement, such as reaching for a cup, the primary motor cortex coordinates signals to multiple muscle groups across different joints. The word somatic comes from the ancient Greek word soma, which means body. The term was adopted into English, retaining its core meaning of pertaining to the body. The voluntary somatic motor pathway is the neural pathway that controls conscious voluntary movements of skeletal muscles. It involves a two-neuron chain, upper motor neurons and lower motor neurons. Upper motor neuron begins in the brain's motor cortex and travels down to the spinal cord or brainstem. Lower motor neuron has its cell body in the spinal cord's anterior horn or in a cranial nerve nucleus in the brainstem. Its axon extends out to a skeletal muscle, where it forms a neuromuscular junction to cause a contraction. What is neuromuscular junction? This is the specific point where the lower motor neuron meets the muscle fiber. What is neurotransmitters? Neurotransmitters are the brain's chemical messengers that transmit signals between neurons to control everything from your thoughts and feelings to bodily functions. They act like a lock-and-key system. When a signal arrives at the end of one nerve cell, the axon, it triggers the release of neurotransmitters, which then cross a small gap to bind to a specific receptor on the next nerve cell, like a key fitting into a lock. This binding can either excite the next cell to send a signal or inhibit it, depending on the neurotransmitter. The upper motor neuron releases the neurotransmitter glutamate to communicate with the lower motor neuron. The lower motor neuron then releases acetylcholine to cause the muscle to contract. What is contralateral control? Contralateral control is the way that the left side of the brain controls the right side of the body and the right side of the brain controls the left side of the body. For example, if you reach for a cup of coffee with your right hand, your left brain hemisphere is the one sending the signals. This opposite side control applies to most motor functions and senses, though there are exceptions, such as the sense of smell. Each side of the primary motor cortex controls the opposite side of the body. Example, the left motor cortex controls the right side. Crossing over. Nerve fibers from the body cross over at the brainstem and spinal cord to connect with the opposite hemisphere. Example, when patients have a stroke on the left side of their brain, they would likely experience symptoms on the right side of your body. It contains a specific map of the body. For example, a section of the cortex is dedicated to the hand and another to the foot. Areas requiring more fine control, like the hands and face, have a larger area of the cortex devoted to them. It uses a major nerve pathway called the corticospinal tract to send signals from the brain down to the muscles in the limbs and body. While it executes movements, it works in tandem with other brain regions, like the prefrontal cortex for planning and the cerebellum and basal ganglia for coordination and fine-tuning, to ensure movements are smooth and controlled. What is a pyramidal cell? A pyramidal cell is a type of neuron in the brain with a pyramid-shaped cell body that plays a key role in processing information and transmitting signals, especially for cognitive functions like memory and voluntary movement. These are excitatory cells, meaning they increase brain activity and are found prominently in the cerebral cortex, hippocampus, and amygdala. Shape. Named for their pyramid-shaped cell body, they have a long apical dendrite and many basal dendrites, which are branching extensions that receive signals. Function. Pyramidal cells are the brain's main excitatory cells, sending signals to other neurons to boost activity rather than inhibit it. They are crucial for higher-level brain functions like learning, memory, and motor control. Their dysfunction is linked to neurological disorders such as epilepsy, Alzheimer's disease, and autism. What is meant by the motor homunculus? The word homunculus comes from Latin, formed from the root homo, man, and the diminutive suffix, culus, little, literally meaning little man. Modern usage. Today, homunculus is used in a more abstract sense, and is now also used in fields like neuroscience to describe sensory and motor maps of the body. The motor homunculus is a distorted, man-like map of the body that represents how the brain's motor cortex controls voluntary movement. Its distorted proportions, with larger areas for the hands, face, and tongue, show that a disproportionate amount of the brain is dedicated to controlling parts of the body that require fine motor skills. The motor homunculus illustrates the principle of somatotopy, where different body parts are mapped to specific areas of the cortex in the frontal lobe. Areas with complex movements, such as the hands and lips, take up a disproportionately large area of the motor cortex. The figure has exaggeratedly large hands, lips, and face because these areas require more precise and complex control, thus needing a larger neural representation in the motor cortex. Regions with less complex movements, like the hip, have a much smaller area on the map. This map helps scientists understand how the brain is organized to manage movement, with specific regions dedicated to specific body parts. Broca's area is a region in the left frontal lobe of the brain that is essential for producing speech. It helps turn thoughts into spoken words by coordinating the muscles of the mouth, tongue, and larynx. Damage to this area can lead to difficulty speaking fluently, even if a person understands what they want to say, a condition known as Broca's aphasia. This is all about we need to know about precentral gyrus, which is located in the front lobe. To understand brain, we need to take time and understand every topic clearly, instead of trying to understand everything in a snap of time where nothing is clear. Once we get the concepts, you will be just amazed of every function of brain, which is the example of live US. Next video, which will be posted in few days, we will talk about details of primary somatosensory cortex, or post-central gyrus, which is located in the parietal lobe, its significance, somatosensory homunculus, Wernicke's area, visual cortex, auditory cortex, and so on. Give me a thumbs up if it helps you. Thank you.